Well, welcome back to After 21, everybody. What's going on, Rhea?
Not much. It is a Sunday morning, my time, ready for a nice, relaxing Sunday. But what about you?
Oh my God, how I wish I was in the US right now. I am in India and it is a Sunday evening. And not even evening, actually, guys. It's like 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, and I am dreading to go to work tomorrow. Update for the pod. I moved cities again, and I am in the midst of house hunting, and I'm in the midst of counting finances, checking my bank balances, and swiping my card. So there's that.
Moving is kind of anxiety inducing because
Juicing.
I'm like looking at housing and stuff like that now too. And I was like, dang, like the amount of times that your credit card like swipes when you're just
Swipes.
like out and about looking at housing, I like forget what that looks like.
I think it's funny because when you and I graduated college, we like moved automatically to another city. So we were in this headspace of first job after college, everything's going to go great. Then COVID hit and we both moved back home. So now for me, when I have to restart that whole process of like being an adult in like mid 20s, I'm just like, oh shit, I forgot that I had to pay for this, or oh shit,
I
like
know. Oh my God. I keep staring at my bank account and being like, this much money is going to leave every month.
oh my God. I haven't, guys, I'm at this point where my bank account is just like, give me money, like literally give me money. And I cannot wait. Because in India, like you don't get bi-weekly salaries, you get monthly salaries. So like I started working the end of May. So I didn't get my salary for the end of May. It's like comprehensively given to you at the end of June. So I'm just like, the expenses are pooling up this high, and I'm just like, money, money, like I need the money. But today I think that's a great segue to introduce our topic for this episode, and that is budgeting. I should have been a little more excited when I said that, but no.
I think we need like a little like noise button. You know how they press it and like the audience goes, woo.
But I don't know about you, Rhea, but I have definitely been through this roller coaster with budgeting, wherein like my first job out of college, I was spot on. Like I bought a finance book called The Financial Diet, and I like, mapped
I
out the
remember
whole.
this actually. I
Yeah,
remember this. Oh my God.
I think I was influenced by my internship at a financial firm, but I was just like creating
Maybe just a little.
just a little like when I tell you this is excessive, I like created like an entire Excel spreadsheet, and I had like a whole thing built out where I like literally divided my income and told myself, Apoorva, you can't spend more than like
Okay,
$1,000 on
I
this,
did
this, and
that
this.
too.
Yeah, I
I
think
did
that's a
just in
first
your
job
defense.
thing.
I had an Excel spreadsheet that like calculated everything as
Everything.
well to like I think that was also to figure out how much rent I could afford because I was like I don't know, and my dad also like sat down and made it with me. My spreadsheet ended up just like not like it existed, and I think I used it for like a month maybe, but my spending was different than what I had predicted on the spreadsheet, so it didn't really matter.
I know. I think like this is kind of like for our newbies who are like jumping out of college and have no idea about finances whatsoever. It's very important to like create some sort of a structure because the real world is so overwhelming. Like I remember when I got my first paycheck, I was like, I could afford a 50, no, not a 50, but like I could afford a $20 Uber without splitting it with someone because hell yeah, I'm making bank. But I mean, but like pretty much over the course of a couple weeks of me doing what I did, I realized I cannot afford that. So I think like when you start right out of college, it's very important to feel things out and like quickly create a structure for yourself in terms of budgeting.
Yeah. And it can be like a loose structure or it can be a very like a thought out structure depending on what you want. Like I think the spreadsheet method does work, especially to keep track of all your expenses sometimes, but
Yeah.
um also sometimes maybe it doesn't work. Like for me, I thought that I would have a lot more expenses than I was having. And then I was also traveling a lot for work. So I was spending like a lot less. And I ended up just like not needing as strict of that budget because like I thought I was going to have a car and then I didn't have a car. So like a lot of that came back to me, but it was good to know what that foundational framework kind of was. And now I'm moving to LA, and I was like, okay, I need to like start keeping some sort of awareness. But what I kind of do is I have like a relatively loose framework where I'm like, this is how much rent is probably going to be. Like, I don't want to go over a certain amount. This is how much utility is going to be. This is how much a car is going to be. This is how much my gym membership is going to be. And like, this is how much groceries are going to be.
Yeah.
No matter what, I give myself like kind of $100 per weekend almost for like going out and spending. And then in my head, I was like, I just had a goal of like, I want to save X amount per month. So like, I'm not even letting that money stay in my checking account. Like once a month, I'm just having an automatic transfer. So it goes out. So when I look at my bank account, I only have a certain amount.
No, I really love that you say that, because so again, this is very person to person thing. Like, I don't know if I'd be very good as a person if I had like a strict framework, because I'm someone who follows things by the book. So if I have like a curb, say at like Apoorva, you can't spend more than X amount, and I do, internally, I beat myself up. So like the loose framework method works for me, but it is what it is per person, but essentially kind of establish a loose framework. Like, I think if you're someone who likes the numbers, and I did initially, like the book that I read for starters told me that, okay, human, if you're going to start budgeting in general, kind of look at your paycheck and split it. The general rule of thumb is like 50-30-20, or there's another rule of thumb that's like 80-20, which is 80% expenses, 20% fun, or the 50-30-20 rule is basically 50% goes towards your fixed expenses. So that could be something like your rent, it could be something like health insurance, your loans, etc. And then 30% is fun. So like for yourself, spend it for yourself, spend it on those dinners, whatever you want to do. And the 20% is invest. So keep that for your future pool. But like, obviously we're human, and that's never going to be followed to the T. You're in your 20s, like we got to have some fun. But I think a loose framework is a great start.
Oh yeah, for sure. And also like knowing, I like to over budget so that like you have extra and you're like pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm someone who's the same. That's like, let me put my cushion for investing maybe like at 30% and reduce my fun element from like 30% to 20% of my expenses, because I want to save and I want to have that good future. So I think like in general, if you're someone who's just starting off with budgeting, go explore, see how the average life costs, and based on that kind of create a framework. And I think like what Rhea told us about kind of automatic transfers, that's a hot tip number 2, guys. Like I used to do that so much. Like Rhea, I don't know if you used to do this, but whenever I used to get my paycheck, literally I would set an automatic transfer of 10% of my paycheck goes towards my savings account. So it's just untouched. It goes into this account that, you know, I wouldn't touch until I needed to, and it would kind of pool just because in case I ran out of a job, which I did a year and a half after I started earning, I knew I had a cushion for myself. So I just kept automatically deducting money in case there was an emergency.
I have always had an automatic transfer actually. So since I was young, I think I had heard somewhere that you're supposed to save like the 10% of your salary. And at that point I was getting a little allowance from my parents. So I started that rule with that allowance. And then now I don't do a percentage anymore. Now I'm just like, my goal is to save this amount per year. So that's like this amount per month, which is like kind of scary because you're like, you are like, wow, I don't actually have a lot of discretionary income. But then you also think about things like buying a car, which I'm in the process of doing, or like buying a house, which I would like to do before I'm 30. So I'm just like, okay, so also having a wedding, like I start to go to all these weddings and I'm like, shit, how much was this wedding?
I
Very
think,
far from getting married, but I think about like this is going to cost a lot.
but I think that's like a great tip for like the folks who are listening, which is at a time in your life where you're just like, okay, for example, I want to save for grad school and I know how much that gives me a ballpark figure in my head. So I'm just like, okay, every time I'm earning my paycheck, I'm going to automatically deduct this and put it into a separate account that says grad school account, or it could just go into that bulk savings account. Like, or I read this in a book as well, like if you are someone who is very like organized with your finances, kind of create buckets in your accounts, and you can do it in your bank account where you're just like, this goes towards travel, this goes towards buying houses, this goes towards just general savings, and like,
Yeah.
and then you can just like split it accordingly into each bucket. Because at its core, I think just like having a goal, like Rhea said, maybe you want to get married in a couple of years and maybe you want that Sabyasachi lehenga and maybe that's going to cost you a bomb. So why not start budgeting for that right now?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think like the key is knowing around what you want or like what you want to give yourself, and trying to work within that. And also like we live in like I guess I don't know if I want to call it like a hustle culture or whatever you want to call it, but most people are able to do more than one thing to a certain extent. So like if your situation isn't supporting the lifestyle you want to live financially, then like you can look at those numbers and be like, I want a part-time job
Yeah.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I think like I made the mistake of, and I don't know if you did this, Rhea, but it was like I was so proactive when I started making money that I started jumping into everything. So when I say everything, it was like, okay, I'm going to start like a fixed deposit where I'm not going to touch it for like 10 months. Okay, I'm also going to start like a investment account and start investing. Okay, I'm going to like save. And it kind of became like a balancing act that I could quickly realized I couldn't balance because I was doing 100 things at once. And it was just like a mathematical fuck up, for the lack of a better term. And that was kind of when my brother actually told me this, and my dad told me this too, which was like, when you're saving or budgeting, you are so kind of motivated with the idea of, I want this in a couple years. You forget that at its core, you need to kind of have a cushion for yourself first before you start venturing out into other avenues. Like, for example, like saving up 6 months worth of money for yourself so that you have the confidence to like go venture out and do other things. So then like essentially if you have 6 months worth of rent or 6 months worth of expenses saved up in your savings account, you can use that additional money that you have into other avenues like investments, like, you know, further looking at other methods of making money like crypto or whatever that might interest you. But yeah, my biggest lesson was don't try a lot with your first paycheck. Just keep it simple.
Definitely keep it simple. I think also one thing that's important to kind of talk about is like we did talk a lot about savings, but oftentimes the first paycheck that you get isn't very much and you don't have a lot of room to save. So you kind of are like stuck in a place of like, okay, well, I can either limit my lifestyle or I can save more. And I actually, as we're talking about this, started to like write out my budget because I was like, let me double check on what my LA budget is again. But one of the things that I was also thinking about is like, I had a pretty big number in my head for savings, which is obviously great. But then I thought, like, do I really want to also not limit my life, but like, do I want to give myself a little bit more wiggle room and not be rigid so that I also feel like I am enjoying my life and I'm not stressed about something, which is something just to like take into account. Like that savings number is there, but also you do want to make sure that you're allowing yourself grace to like live life.
No, I'm so glad you said that because that was one of the first advice I got because I was stressing about all of these things. And literally everybody around me was like, you're making money for the first time, or this is your first job, or maybe your second job. You're 23, 24 years old. Yes, you got to save, but also, yes, you have to enjoy because you don't want to deprive yourself of those things that we've spoken about in previous episodes too, that define you. So definitely something that is a key reminder for most people. And I think even going off of that, one thing I think has dawned on me is every time you get a job or every time you move a city, it's almost impossible to save for the first 3 to 4 months until you're settled. Like getting a house or renting out, I don't know, a new car until you get a car of your own. Or, I mean, I'm doing this now, like staying in a hotel room until you get your house sorted. Like they're all expenses, and that is okay because that's a part of growing up, restarting. And also it's a part of your budget. Like you have to, pay attention to those expenses because those are inevitable expenses.
Yeah. It's also kind of like, I mean, more than just that, you're meeting a lot of people in the first month that you go there, and you're often meeting people in public spaces. So like that also costs money.
Yeah. You know what, guys? I think this topic was pretty much kind of a rudimentary episode on what we think about budgeting. We're not financial gurus, but we definitely, I think the one thing that we both follow personally is having a loose framework and being aware of what goes in and what goes out. Because at the end of the day, like budgeting is all about configuring to your lifestyle and your lifestyle choices. And as long as you are aware of what is happening and you are not literally, what's that movie again? Confessions of a Shopaholic, where you're literally just like, like going out there and giving your credit card, you're in a good spot. And with that, let's wrap up our takeaways.
So number one is that to just have some type of framework, whether it's a loose framework or like a very structured framework, whatever works for you, but have a framework for how you want to be spending.
Number two is trust automatic transfers. Legitimately set that timeline, link your accounts, send the money away even before you know it, because that's the best way to, one, save, two, pay your bills on time, and three, not go over debt or over your curb of expenses.
Number three is that also allowing yourself some wiggle room. You want to focus on the future, but you also want to focus on making sure you're living life in the moment and having fun. So figure out what that balance is for you.
Lastly, keep it simple. Like budgeting does not have to be like a 5-step process where you're investing and you're creating an emergency fund for yourself and a travel fund and 100 other things. So yeah, keep it simple, you guys.
Cool.
So with that, you guys, we just wrapped up another episode. We will see you next Wednesday to get you through your hump day. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.